Welcome to the 25th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. My today's guest, Shauna Stewart, is the founder of Linger Boutique, a lingerie and sexual wellness boutique in Washington State, and the host of Life Turned On podcast, where she explores stories of sexual self-discovery in midlife and beyond. A few short years ago, she was probably the most repressed, vanilla, middle-aged gasping homeschool mom of two to have ever dreamt of opening a pleasure boutique, yet here we are. After a 15-year career in tourism and economic development, Shauna is now committed to helping women feel more connected and alive by normalizing rest and pleasure. Welcome, Shauna, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Marta. I'm really excited about today's conversation.
I'm so excited too, because what could be more important than pleasure and in life?
Yeah.
Hey, how would you like to start? Would you be able to tell me or just one of the stories that brought you to where you are in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the origin story for both not only my business, but also my own real self-discovery journey was really around COVID times. In 2020, I got very sick. I one day I woke up and I had a patch of hives on my thigh and a thumb cramp, and I had never experienced either of
Mhm.
those symptoms before. And over the next 9 months, the list of symptoms got so long, I joked that I needed an old-timey scroll to list them all. A roll
Mm,
of toilet paper would have done at the time, but those were hard to come by during COVID. But yeah, very, very sick. Doctors told my husband to get my affairs in order. I was in crippling pain, having him walk me to the bathroom, change my clothes in the middle of the night. And I had seen every specialist under the sun, no answers. And I don't know if any of your listeners do this, but when desperate, in pain, and looking for answers, I just kept going to Google and trying to
uh-huh.
figure out what was going on. And eventually, I read this little nugget that changed my life. And it was just that pleasure is the antidote to pain. And it
Okay.
absolutely blew my mind because I had always been taught or I had learned that pleasure caused pain. So if it was sexual pleasure, you were going to get an STI or an unwanted
Hmm.
pregnancy or a broken heart if you didn't stay within very narrow
Hmm.
rules of what sex and sexuality meant. And then just in general, I considered myself a very ambitious, driven, high achiever. And so pleasure felt like a distraction from my big
Hmm.
goals rather than something that could actually amplify and pursue them. So when I was sick, I just spent a lot of time thinking about the role of pleasure, how I had ignored it in my life. And then I started little acts of prioritization of this pleasure, little things like the smile on my kid's face and just like, can I really lean into this moment when I'm seeing their eyes twinkle and their
Hmm.
face light up, or when I'm snuggling them on the couch? Ice cream played a big role, which was there's a whole story, but yeah, just finding little acts of pleasure, and slowly over time my body began to heal. I still don't
Wow.
know. I still have never been diagnosed, but I do believe that it had a lot to do with stress, and that pleasure really helped me heal.
Beautiful. And I think it would be important for you maybe to share a little bit of how you define pleasure and whether you would say that those small acts of pleasure have allowed you to change the narrative that you have in your head of what pleasure is, and how did you allow yourself to actually receive pleasure and give yourself pleasure and lead a more enjoyable, pleasurable life.
Yeah, so many good questions in there. I think pleasure to me is just things that feel good. And when I say like feel good, I really mean like deeply and truly.
Hmm.
There's I kind of go back to sometimes using this analogy of like chocolate, and I don't want to like yuck anybody's yum here, but I used to be obsessed with Reese's peanut butter cups. And
Mhm.
my husband would like stash them in the house in case I like just quote unquote needed them in the moment,
Mhm.
right? And then I would stand in the pantry and I would shove it down my face and I would not even like remember tasting it, right? And so there's a difference between, I think, like just like short-term hits of
Mhm.
something that we think is going to make us feel good, but ultimately, like, I didn't get the pleasure of the sensation of eating it. I would feel bad about eating it later. My body wouldn't respond well to it. But then now it's like if I buy the really high quality chocolate and I sit out on my back porch and I'm pairing it with like a cherry and I'm just letting
Mhm.
the sensations, immersing myself in the sensations, that to me is more pleasurable than just kind of the short-term hit. So I think pleasure gets a bad rap because we think that it kind of has all these consequences. And I think that when we're really in our pleasure, we're really in the moment, we're really in our senses, in our body, and we're doing things that like really, truly, and deeply feel good without the guilt. I think that, let's see, in terms of sexual pleasure, that has been something that I have really spent the last 3 years unpacking and slowly discovering. When I opened my store, Linger Boutique, we specialize in lingerie and sleepwear. And I joked at the time, like, I knew absolutely nothing about retail and I knew nothing
Mhm.
about sex. And people would come back at me like, well, you have 2 children, Shauna. Of course, you know about sex. I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I knew about reproduction. I knew how to get
Mhm.
pregnant, how not to get pregnant. And I knew how to perform the sex, right? There's
Mhm.
these scripts in our culture that we just can kind of follow. And I knew how to perform the sex. But sex for pleasure, sex for experiencing it within my own body hadn't been something that I had really prioritized, even though there'd be orgasms and so forth.
Mhm.
It just wasn't something that I was like, I felt like I wanted or needed. Um, but there's so many health benefits and wellness benefits to sexual pleasure. The hormones that are released through orgasm, even like the connection piece. I think that so much of pleasure is about connection, whether that's connection to yourself, to source of the universe, to the person that you're with. If you're with somebody, it's very much about connection. And it's about like feeling good. So the last 3 years has been a constant pursuit of figuring out what my body likes, what feels good, and how to bring more of that into my life and in the lives of those around me as well in a meaningful way.
Mhm. So beautiful. And it feels to me that having your own boutique has allowed yourself as well to, well, I would say sexually liberate yourself and to heal various aspects of yourself. And now you're able to support and empower other women. Are you able to mention a little bit how has that journey of you empowering women, allowing them to feel more connected with their body, how has it been developing? How has it been shifting? I'm very curious about that support that
Yeah,
you're offering.
it's been an enormous gift to be in this role, right? And so I get to see people in my shop on a regular basis, and we'll do bra fittings or lingerie try-ons, or I will be introducing people to their first ever toy, or if they've
Uh-huh.
had a toy, it was something they got cheap on Amazon and it's been under the bed,
Uh-huh.
ignored forever, and they feel like there's stigma or shame around
Oh,
it.
yes.
And so a lot of my work in the shop, on my podcast, and any platform I have access to is just trying to really reduce the shame and stigma around sexuality and pleasure. And
Mm-hmm.
then helping people just like ultimately, I think at the end of the day, feel more of themselves. And so, or feel more like themselves. So, in terms of the lingerie component, I like to consider our dressing room like a little magic portal,
Mm-hmm.
because people will go in and have all sorts of feelings about our bodies. Like we have especially generate like the millennial generation and above, we grew up with magazines and television shows with this very specific idea of a beauty standard of what we're supposed to look like. And if we differ from that, we might hold a lot of shame in our bodies. But it's really magical to see people step into the dressing room nervous and then come out and they are strutting entirely differently. Their shoulders are back, their chin's high, they have glowing faces. Some people just want to walk out of the store in their new bra that actually makes them feel good. And then on the sexuality side of things, just helping people feel safe, like they have a safe, stigma-free environment where they can ask questions and learn and see somebody else talk about sex and sexuality without shame, and so that they can maybe find a little bit more of that within themselves as well. And we do classes and workshops and just helping people learn about themselves. And I've sat with a lot of people in tears and heard their stories. And I think my whole podcast is about stories. I think that stories need to be shared because there's so much silence and that creates the shame and stigma around sexuality. But when we can listen to one another and share our own stories, it can lead to more of that connection, feeling less alone, and just that permission to pursue pleasure in our lives.
So important and beautiful. So one thing you've mentioned about empowering women when they are able to shop for various lingerie and various beauty sets. And I agree, because even today I have my most beautiful lingerie on and it makes me feel so empowered. And this is what I do. And this is just for me. And this is how I turn myself on, and it's got like no sexual connotation, but it just makes me feel so good. And actually I don't even say a word, but I gift myself various sets of lingerie throughout various moments of my life, just as an expression of self-love. And it makes me feel so good, and it doesn't matter what size my body is at a particular moment, but it's something so beautiful. People might find it trivial or maybe not so important, but it actually changes the way you feel about yourself.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said all of that because you're 100% right. I think that lingerie has been, and pleasure in American culture anyway, has always been very much about the male gaze, male pleasure. And so I find oftentimes women will resist lingerie because they will say, oh, I don't have anyone to wear that for. Or, oh, he'll like that, but it will only last 5 minutes or 5 seconds or whatever. And it's just like, it's about somebody else's experience. But I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and you said it exactly that, is just like, how can we make these things, reclaim them for ourselves, give ourselves permission to wear the beautiful thing for ourselves. Nobody else is going to see it. Like, this is something that's not for anybody else. It's just for you. If somebody does happen to enjoy it, great for them. But like, starting your day with your first and most intimate layer in something that feels really like beautiful and good. You said it yourself, it's like an enormous act of self-love. And then I think too, with pleasure has to begin with ourselves as well, to be able to know what we like and giving ourselves permission to feel good on our own. It's something that we can give to our bodies, our hearts, and our souls in a really beautiful way, rather than just like kind of always being outward giving to somebody else.
Definitely. And a question about sex toys. What sex toys can women buy in your boutique? Because I think it's so much important to mention about it too, because so many women are not aware and they might only think about the conventional sex toy and something that actually does not give so much pleasure. And there are so many other things, sex toys, and that you can, with the use of those toys, you're able to connect so much more with yourself. So I'm curious about that.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think that one of the things that's been really interesting in the industry in the last several years is, as more and more women have entered the sexuality industry, but also sex tech specifically, and science and
Mm-hmm.
research has, right? It's all been centered around men for ages. And now all
Uh-huh.
these women are entering the market and radically changing it, right? So in the
Uh-huh.
sex toy industry specifically, back in the day when it originally started, it was founded by men. And so then you have all these men
Yes.
sitting around thinking about sex toys for women. And they're like, you know what I think that women really want?
Mm-hmm.
Giant penises. We're just going
Mm-hmm.
to make lots of giant
Yes.
silicone penises. And for people who love that, I love that those are available for them. And also, we know that the women's primary pleasure center is going to be her clitoris, which is often stimulated best externally, not internally. So lots of vibrators are coming on the market that are beautifully designed. They're discreet, both in terms of like how they're visually designed,
Mm-hmm.
also the sound. You don't have these giant motors
Mm-hmm.
that can be distracting. They are made with really high quality products because if we're letting something close to our intimate parts of our body inside our bodies, we don't want to have to stress about what materials these products are made of. um so we sell vibrators, dills, lubricants, arousal serums, all like primarily female founded brands, and really high quality ingredients, quality pieces that will last for a long time. And then the other things that we sell a lot of like sensory toys and tools as well, because I think that there's so much pleasure that can be found in all different parts of our body if we give ourselves time to explore that. So sensory tools might be things like feather ticklers. We've made like furry mitts, we have finger
Mm-hmm.
claws, and then things that can even look really scary or intimidating to some people, like floggers or even chains and so forth. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we like to show people how those can be, if you're interested in like more intense power dynamic, can certainly be used for that. And they can be used in a really sensual way as well, depending on what your body and what kind of experience you're craving. So
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. It made me laugh when you mentioned about vibrators with giant motors, and it a story popped into my head a couple of months ago. I ordered myself a crystal wand because I work with crystals and I like to
yes.
use that type of sex toys. And it made me laugh because on a custom duty it says crystal sculpture. And
Oh, funny.
I really appreciate it because then the postman and everyone just didn't know what it
Yeah.
is. But it also makes me think that there's still that misconception and a bad connotation with sex toys. And what a
Yeah.
shame that they couldn't have put a
R-
crystal wand or a sex toy. But yeah, it's just something that made me laugh. Um, okay. Um, would you be able to mention maybe about the most common questions that women ask you when they first enter your shop? And maybe you could share one story or two, of course, anonymously, about how you've witnessed a woman's transformation from the moment
Mhm.
she entered your shop for the first time, and then
Yeah.
when she left after maybe attending some of the workshops or maybe trying some sex toys or maybe um, leaving the boutique with some sets of lingerie. Curious about that.
Yeah, I'm going to start with that because so I think like one of the, just off the top of my head, one of the first questions people will ask sometimes is just like size range around lingerie. And we're a
Mm-hmm,
small boutique, but we actually do a pretty dang good job of meeting a variety of needs. And
mm-hmm,
people are actually surprised by what we can offer. We can't help everybody, unfortunately, yet, but hopefully as we grow, we'll be able to serve more and more people. In terms of the toys, the questions are pretty general. Just kind of like just curious, wanting to know about them. One of the biggest complaints I hear from women that they're trying to resolve sexually is that they're in their heads a lot.
mm,
They're working on their to-do list while they're trying to be in the like in part connection with their partner, or they're concerned about the laundry pile or the dishes, and it's really hard for them to get into the moment. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things about both toys and especially the sensory toys, because it can help invite you to get into the body without rushing to penetration or just like genital touch. Like we just kind of have,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, we have this like narrow script. Um, but as people can kind of get into their bodies more individually, it helps them be more present when they're with a partner. And then yeah, the different ways that the body can experience sensation can also draw people into their bodies and help release some of those nagging thoughts. One of my favorite stories of a customer is she was one of my early customers, and she would come in regularly and she would be buying pajamas, like more like the loungewear, less even lingerie,
Mm-hmm.
but beautiful silk chemises, robes.
Mm-hmm.
And she would always come back to see what was new. And she had spent a good amount of money with me before finally, like, she was quiet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, like on her third or fourth trip in, she just kind of like casually reached over to
Mm-hmm.
one of the more discreet toys and
Okay.
just put it on there, but like didn't make eye contact, didn't really
Mm-hmm.
want to like talk about it too much. And
Mm-hmm.
I always try to just like normalize it and provide at least like a very neutral information about it so they at least can know how to use it and so forth. Anyway, but she's been coming back, and one of her last trips, she's like, yeah, well, I should stop and say one of the things that we have in our store is what we call a spice cabinet. And it's my
Okay.
grandmother's dresser. So it's like this antique marble
Uh-huh.
top wooden dresser that looks like you wouldn't, it just looks like lingerie storage or something. But in
Mm-hmm.
it, we have more of our like BDSM, spicy, kink oriented
Mm-hmm.
items. And so yeah, she's been spending a lot of time in there, and she's just like, yeah, it's amazing what I can get away with in this store,
Yes.
and exploring. And so over about 2 years, she went from not being able to make eye contact, buying like a very small discreet vibrator, and really trying to like hide the purchase with the purchase
Mm-hmm.
of all these
Mm-hmm.
other things, to like coming in like, I want to see what's new, and opening the drawers and going home with different things and trying them out. And so I think that there's like a little bit of a swagger change that happens
Mm-hmm.
when women are like discovering something about themselves. Like they go from this kind of closed off, a little skeptical, unsure kind of posture to like confidently being able to walk in and ask for what they want. And I think asking for what they want, women asking for what they want, is like one of the other biggest challenges in relationships and in sexuality, because I think a lot of women don't even know what they want because they've been put in this giver role for their partners. And so to be able to receive and know what actually feels good to them is a pretty profound thing.
Mm-hmm. So important. So it feels to me that you are able to create a sense of safety for your
Mm-hmm.
customers and for women to feel empowered to be able to try various things. Because I think the safety component is so much important when exploring our sexuality. Uh,
Yes. Yeah,
Definitely.
the safety thing is number one, right? Like a woman is not going to be able to experience pleasure unless she feels safe. And so to be able to relax and actually receive any kind of touch, sensation, whatever the pleasure experience is, unless she feels safe, it will not be pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's number one. And so it's been felt really good that my idea with the shop was, I think a lot of people have to, if they want to access toys or lingerie, they have to go to these places, not all lingerie stores for sure, but go to places that don't feel safe or
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable. I don't know what it's like where you are, but here in the States, sex shops tend to be in like kind of seedy strip mall areas.
It's the
The lights
same.
are
Yeah.
dark. Yeah, it's fluorescent lighting. There's one shop near us where like a security guard greets you at the door, which just doesn't feel super great. And So just wanting to kind of turn that model on its head, that's not something that you have to like hide your face at or go through this threshold of feeling unsafe, unsure, nervous about shopping for pleasure. Um, we opened our store right in kind of a very family friendly part of our community. We, instead of fluorescent lights, we have floor to ceiling windows.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough privacy to give people a little bit of yeah, just privacy. But it just feels like you're going into a clothing store or a gift shop, and it just feels elegant and elevated. And I think that that has helped women feel more safe and secure exploring things, because it feels like we're meeting them more where they're at versus them having to cross over this like dangerous threshold to
Mm-hmm.
access things that feel good.
Oh, that's so beautiful. If I had lived locally, I would have already shopped and been a
Yeah.
customer. It's so nice because it feels you're also creating a sense of community, or you're making like friendships, or and you're able, you know what those women really want, or you know what their maybe expectations, or certainly maybe they've shared about their vulnerabilities or maybe traumas. So you're able to help them on their transformative sexual journey. So that's so beautiful and so meaningful. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
really felt like such a privilege. I, as mentioned in the bio, I spent 15 years in tourism and economic development, and basically my entire career, I was in these roles of community leadership.
Hmm.
And I often will comment and reflect on how much more connected I feel to my community now as a result of doing this work than when I had like a title and a role and I was like a community leader. I feel like I'm in a position to have so much more connection with the people of my community because I get to know them on a very vulnerable level, you know, and like you said, just like hearing their stories. I get to hear their stories in the shop. I hear a lot of stories on the podcast, and just giving space for those stories to be told and heard in a meaningful way. I think we need to be talking about this stuff a lot more.
Definitely. And you're
So,
removing so much taboo, and we're like breaking stigma. And I think it's so important because people want to be able to speak freely about sex.
mhm.
And having someone like you uh, to show them that actually it is safe to explore their sexuality, I think it is so beautiful. And I definitely agree that um, even going to that to such a store like yourself, and then buying yourself a sex toy is so much more important, and it can give profound healing effects. And because when you engage in a self-pleasure journey, you're actually able, as you've mentioned, to get to know yourself. And how can you expect your partner to know what it is that you like if you don't know your body? So I think there is a
Mhm.
deeper meaning to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it like really also just changes the potential for the relationship with our body as well. So not only are you learning what you actually like, but it also kind of going back to this idea of like a lot of us have a lot of shame or stigma around what our body looks like
Mm-hmm.
and the way that's transformed in the dressing room. But I think what's more important is like how our body feels. And so
Mm-hmm.
we can often be so concerned about how our body is being experienced by somebody else that we're not actually in our own body experiencing whatever it is we're experiencing and the pleasure and the sensations of the moment. And so having a self pleasure practice helps teach your body to receive, and that changes that relationship where we can see our bodies as more than something to just look at, that it's like something that can be a pathway and like your vehicle to so much pleasure.
Hmm. Beautiful. And I think for me also, I believe then engaging in self-pleasure and then becoming aware of what it is that you like, it can empower you to be more confident in terms of vocalizing to your partner
Mhm.
what it is that you like, to really speak openly about your own needs, and to be able to be open to your partner's needs as well. So I think the whole relationship can transform about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the conversations I have a lot with folks is, and I've been here 100% myself, where it's like your partner wants to please you, and they ask, "Well, what do you want? What do you want?"
Mm-hmm.
And then all these women are just like, I don't know. What do you want? Because we've never taken the time to actually figure it out. So we just default to what the other person wants and let them lead the way. But by getting really comfortable and understanding our bodies, then we're able to actually respond, like you said, with confidence. And that helps with boundary setting. It helps co creating an experience that's really meaningful
Mm-hmm.
and connective. And it really is important to spend a lot of time figuring that out, figuring out what it is you like and figuring out what it is you want.
Mm-hmm. And another stigma or something, misconception that I would like to like dismantle and try to talk openly about is that so many people think that it's only during the first couple of months of a relationship that sex is very good. That once
Oh,
that honeymoon phase passed, then there'll be lots of boredom. And I disagree because I so much believe when we talk about women's orgasm, we need to feel safe. And then for any relationship, there has to be a space for open communication. And it is with
mm-hmm.
time that we are able to hopefully get more vulnerable with each other. So I believe then
Mm-hmm.
sex can actually get much better with time. So I'm wondering what's your view
Yes.
on that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There is a cocktail of hormones that's released in those early parts of the
Yes.
relationship, and they
Mm-hmm.
do tend to die down around anywhere between 6 months and 2 years. So when you first get connected with somebody, yeah, it feels like you're on drugs, maybe a little bit
Mm-hmm.
like you're high, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
certain level of pleasure that comes with that. And then after that, um, that that kind of rush of hormones goes away, but what then you have to work with, like you said, is trust, vulnerability, communication. The people studies have shown this consistently, but the people who have some of the best sex lives are people who are prioritizing it and putting in the effort. Like sex
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be work, but it does require effort to keep it interesting, to keep it connected, to keep it feeling good, and recognizing and understanding that our bodies and our relationship is they're going to change, and they should change over time. And rather than just kind of like trying to look back and grasp for what was, is continually being in the moment and figuring out, what can this moment really be for us? What do we want to co-create together
Mm-hmm.
now? What does my body need now that I'm in my 40s versus what my body needed when I
Mm-hmm.
was in my 20s, and what our bodies will need when we're in our 60s? And um, yeah, just being really intentional about that. It's like the intentionality, the effort, and prioritization. And people have a great time. And studies also show that people in their 60s are having the best, specifically for women, are having the best sex of their lives, because they've been able to let go of so many of those external expectations, standards, and they're really tapped into what it is they really want, have the skills to be able to communicate it. And I just think that that's really inspiring to be able to look forward to.
Definitely. And I think we can use the same analogy to, well, when thinking about the relationship itself, like a relationship evolves, it changes, we grow as a couple. So it never
Yes.
stays the same. So it's the same, like you work as a couple on
Yes.
strengthening your relationship. And in terms of your sexual life, sex life, it is exactly the same. So
Yes.
I really like that as well. So
Yeah.
do you think it's so important to be intentional and to, well, how can people prioritize? How can people find ways of celebrating life and maybe inviting more love and pleasure and affection to their day-to-day life? Like, what would you say?
Ooh, I've got a few things on this. One is some of the common sex advice is to schedule sex. And that
Mm,
has always made me feel some ways. What I encourage is just like making time for intimacy, And
Mm-hmm.
so intimacy can be a lot of things. It can be emotional, just talking connection. It could be naked snuggling. It could be like, let's take a nice long bath together. It just takes the pressure off of making sure like a specific act happens every time. I also encourage people to really expand their definition of sex. In our culture, we have this idea that it's this act that, I mean, if you're lucky, lasts about 7 to 15 minutes, but it starts with a little foreplay. And the sex isn't over until like an erect penis has gone into a vagina, and then the penis ejaculates, and then that's when the sex is over. Well, for a woman, that's not particularly pleasurable for most women, and it's when it takes 20 to 40 minutes for a woman's body to become aroused, and this kind of script of sex is over and done with, and within a few minutes, that's not going to be something that people are going to want to come back for. Specifically women, they're not going to desire or want that kind of experience. So being able to really expand the playground for what is defined as sex, and it can just be playful and fun. I love the idea of experimentation dates as well. And so picking something that you guys might be curious about trying, and taking the pressure off of any kind of goal or achievement from the space, but just like that it's foreplay, it's for discovering something new. So carving out a good chunk of time to try something new, and then being able to talk about like, what did you like, what did you not like, and making it just kind of fun. And then you have another tool or not for future experiences as well. I feel like I had so much I wanted to share, and now I'm forgetting the question. So,
Oh no,
yeah,
don't worry.
but
But
that's
I think you've mentioned you've used a keyword, fun. I think like you should have
yeah,
so much. Well, I think there should be so much laughter introduced, well, in general to any relationship, but especially in sex life. It's so nice to remove the pressure and remove the need
yes,
to perform and to actually be curious, but also, well, laugh at the things, because nothing is going to be perfect. And
yeah.
it must just be funny. And it's not that one partner is going to laugh at another, but like embracing and then really we'll have fun with it. I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, being playful, looking at sex through the lens of play versus through the lens of work, because I feel like, especially for women, they're feeling overly burdened on a lot of like the emotional labor that they have to take care of on a regular basis. So sex, one of the complaints I hear often is like, sex is just like one more thing to do, and it's like
Mm,
work. And while, like I said, it does require effort, that effort can come from a very playful place.
mm-hmm,
And if you're taking the goals away, so sex doesn't always have to include orgasm. We love
mm-hmm,
it when it does, but it doesn't always have to include that. It doesn't always have to follow a certain script or look a certain way. And when we, like, if you think about kids in a sandbox, they're not there trying to like check a box or achieve a goal or whatever. They're
mm,
just there to explore and experiment and to understand a little bit more about the world through getting their hands on it. And so,
mm-hmm,
yeah, just I think that bringing in a playful attitude can be really helpful.
mm-hmm. That's so important. And then to remember that both partners, they don't have to orgasm at the same time, because this is a misconception as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
But for those women, because I keep meeting so many women who have never experienced orgasm, are you able to share
Uh-huh.
some tips or anything just so that they can start? And I know it's about getting to know their bodies, but like how a woman can orgasm? How does a woman's orgasm look like? Maybe you could mention a little bit, or how, so that some women who maybe have no idea about it,
Yeah.
because I truly believe we are not being educated. We are only taught
Right.
about our reproductive health and how to not get pregnant, I
Right.
suppose how to experience pleasure. I'm
Yeah, I
curious
think,
about that.
y- yeah, this is so interesting. I think that, Yes, you're absolutely right. There's so many women who have never orgasmed or really struggle to orgasm. There can be a lot of reasons for this. Sometimes it is there could be a health component to it. So talking to your doctor about it can be a really good place to start. I've heard a lot of
Mhm,
people being able to transition either like diet and lifestyle stuff or change their medication or something like that, that could just be a barrier.
mhm,
And then I think just really like with self-pleasure practices, a couple things. One is the more you focus on having an orgasm, the less likely you are to
mhm,
have the orgasm
mhm.
because it's too
Yes.
much pressure.
Mhm,
And so, more trying to focus on pleasure, understanding that women's bodies can take 20 to 40 minutes just to become fully aroused, like block
mhm,
that time out. And
mhm,
then really treating yourself really well. I think when we think about masturbation or self pleasure, sometimes we can just think about touching the genitals and that focus and all the energy is just there.
mhm,
But it's really an invitation to explore your whole body and be able to touch different parts of your body with
mhm,
trying out different types of touch. So it could be really soft and sensual, or you can kind of get in with like nails and see
mhm,
what you like.
mhm,
But playing music, lighting a candle, maybe you even take yourself on a date or cook yourself a lovely meal
mhm,
beforehand. Um, but I think like just all the stuff leading up to it matters, like how you're treating your body, how you're caring for yourself, not treating your body like it's a machine that's just supposed to perform the orgasm, but this um, vehicle, like I said, for pleasure and receiving that. So just treating your body really well. And then I think the other thing is just really understanding and remembering that the woman's primary pleasure center is the clitoris. And so a lot of times there's a lot of focus on this like internal stimulation and penetration. That's the best way for penis owners to orgasm.
mhm,
It is not the best
mhm,
way for vulva owners to orgasm,
mhm,
for the most part. And so yeah, being able to either touching with your hands, toys, but really spending a lot of time on the clitoris, even around the clitoris, to like help warm up and stimulate. The clitoris is
mhm.
actually an enormous organ. It's not just the part that we see externally,
Yes.
right? So it has these like arms that come down between the labia or behind the labia. So being able to kind of stimulate there. Um, oh, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think just like really um, allowing yourself just to feel pleasure, and then see where that takes you, and just remember like taking the pressure off that if you're not orgasming through internal stimulation, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Mhm.
Like most women
Yes.
don't. We all need, not all, there are people who can do it, but there needs to be this external clitoral stimulation that's a part of the
Mhm.
process.
Okay. Well, thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah.
So, what's the final thought or anything that you would like to leave the viewers and listeners with?
Yeah, my big encouragement is really to talk about sex, sexuality, and pleasure more. I think that there's just so much shame and stigma. We've mentioned that a lot. There's a lot of taboo around it. And then as a result, people are just struggling on their own in silence and oftentimes worrying, what is wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I can't orgasm. What's wrong with me? I don't desire sex. What's wrong with me? And we like personalize it, take it all in. And I think that by having some trusted people that you can talk with,
Mhm,
um, can really make a difference in helping you feel less alone and taking
mhm,
some of that shame off, some of that pressure off when you're hearing somebody else is maybe experiencing something similar or you're
mhm,
getting ideas. And then I also think that self-education is just so important. So seeking out books, podcasts, classes. We're not taught how to experience sexual pleasure in
mhm,
our culture. You mentioned our sex ed, it's very focused on reproduction, either
mhm,
avoiding it or making it happen. And
mhm,
so yeah, we do have to invest in learning different ways that our bodies can experience pleasure. I love to recommend watching some Netflix series like Sex, Love, and Goop, and even How to Build a Sex Room, because it kind of exposes you to a lot of different ideas, and not
Mm-hmm. Of
everything is going to be for everybody, for sure.
course. Mm-hmm.
But then it's like it's an easy conversation starter with a
Mm-hmm.
partner or with yourself or with a friend, of like, oh, did you see that room? They really like this
Mm-hmm.
thing. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that? And it just takes so much of the pressure away, and it's playful and fun,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to talk about it. But so I think like communication and education just can go a really long way in inviting more pleasure into our lives.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shauna. And finally, what are your offerings and where people can find you?
Yeah, so I have my retail space at lingerboutique.com. This is our kind of our landing site for everything. So we have lingerie and sleepwear and sexual wellness products there. And then coming soon, I will be offering a retreat, women's retreats, all about
Mm.
receiving and embodiment and getting into experiencing more pleasure. So that'll be coming soon as well. Also, lingerboutique.com. On Instagram, I'm at linger.you. You do have to type in the whole thing because that account is shadow banned. And so that's where more of the sexual wellness content lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started a new account for lingerie, and that's Linger BTQ on Instagram. So I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
connect with people there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shauna, so much. I had so much pleasure talking about pleasure, and it's been an honor to have you on a podcast because I truly believe we've had such an important conversation, and you're doing such an important job changing lives of, well, not only women, but like the relationships. And yeah, so thank you so much again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on and just bringing this conversation forward. I think that it's really important, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it.
Thank you. Goodbye. And I want to say goodbye to all of the viewers and the listeners. Bye bye.
Bye.